flat on the ground, and you get some duct tape and aluminum foil, and you layer the bags, and you seal the bag back together. So you can walk in the mall, and it looks like you got a mall bag full of items, but it's really the thickness from the duct tape. And we used to just drop the clothes in the bag, roll the bag up like that, and walk off, and it don't alarm.
How long did you do that?
I did that till I was so 14. I ended up going to a juvenile program for stealing. So I went to juvenile program for stealing cars, stealing clothes, like.
Effectively the blueprint for how your body is built. Your chromosomes exist in every cell, and without them, your body can't build anything. You can kind of think of it as both the foundation and map for how new cells are reproduced. So if your chromosomes are damaged, then that means any new cells reproduced by that cell are going to be damaged or malformed as well. When they looked at the micrograph for what Hisashi's bone marrow looked like, this is a healthy person's chromosome mapping, and this is what Hisashi's look like. This isn't damage to your immune system. This is an erasing of your immune system. The experts couldn't even look at this and tell which of the chromosomes were damaged or destroyed, because then there may be some way to treat it. It was just seen that all of them had been wiped out.
You're not going to play the game. I guess I ain't playing the game. So I literally sat there, and mind you, this is like the biggest game of the year. This is like a major deal. So my brother's, he's in the Vanguard program, and I'm dressed and everything. So I sat there for 3 periods.
Yeah.
I didn't move. I'm like, dude, I didn't say it.
How old are you? How old are you at this time?
I was in the, that was either 3rd or 4th grade. It was 4th grade. And I was like, I'm not
9 years old.
I was like, I'm not moving. I mean, I didn't say it. So my whole deal is, some people are like, dude, just say I'm sorry so you can play the game. No, I didn't say it. So therefore, I'm not going to sit here and apologize. Now, when I was in 12th grade government class, it was a trip with Miss Joseph. She's teaching and she says, a president can't serve more than 8 years. I said, it's not true. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, that's simply not true. I said, we have empirical data that shows that. You can actually, I said, Lyndon Baines Johnson took over as president on November 22nd, 1960.
Raid's 3-year anniversary party just ended, but there are still special events with loads of champions and goodies right now. So, enter via our link in the description or QR code to get $40 of rewards right away, including 3 champions, Misericord, Tiger Soul and Romero, plus 10 Magic XP brews, 10 Force XP brews, and 10 Spirit brews. All this treasure will be waiting for you here. The ascension of Gustavus Adolphus to the throne of Sweden in 1611 is generally regarded as the starting point of the Swedish Empire. The able young king inherited a multitude of conflicts in the region, most notably the Ingrian War against the Tsardom of Russia. The war was concluded with the Peace of Stolbovo in 1618, which stipulated that Sweden would gain Ingria and parts of Karelia, thereby denying Russia access to the Baltic Sea. Russia, which was still recovering.
Most of the people I dealt with were high-level drug traffickers who had hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm doing this interview in silhouette because 2 agencies and an intelligence agency informed me that the Medellin cartel issued a contract on my life. I spent a year and a half putting together what I think is one of the more sophisticated fronts used in undercover. I built the persona of Robert Musella. I dressed the part, certainly had the lifestyle, drove a Rolls-Royce, Mercedes, Jaguar. I was embedded in real businesses. Had an air charter service with a private jet. We had a jewelry chain with 30 locations on the East Coast. A lot of cash goes through the Diamond District every single day. So if you've got those kinds of businesses, you have a very good excuse for where the cash came from. I was embedded in an investment company, a mortgage brokerage business, and even a brokerage firm with a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. And then I and my partner began a 2-year
sense that, I never went hungry. I always had clothes on my back, but I mean, just as an example, like when I lived in Texas, we lived in this like 1,100 square foot, 3-bedroom place, no AC, concrete floors, like tile in the bathroom, in the kitchen, because legally they had to have tile in the wet spaces, and, I kind of knew from like a young age that I didn't want that, like, growing up, like I wanted more, like out of life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't spend, I wasn't in the same school for more than 2 years in a row.
Wow.
So I never had any like stability, continuity with my childhood. In fact, I didn't have any stability until I moved in with my grandparents my sophomore through senior year. And luckily I did, because that was kind of like the...
Have you heard of a sixth sense?
Being able to see ghosts and stuff.
Okay, so I think most people would agree that we have five senses. And some people would say, isn't there something like a sixth sense? And I don't think it's agreed what that might be. So I actually did a literature review of several pieces of research about how many senses humans have. And we actually have 34 as we currently understand it.
34. And so what does this mean? Like, what is because you're making an assertion here. What is the assertion that you're making? And what does that mean for the material sort of consequences of my life?
I'm making a hypothesis based on both the analogy of the observable universe and the fact that we have this expanded suite of senses to challenge you to understand that you are capable of much more than you think you are. And, you're a really good case in point for me because you love rationality and data and science, and you don't really love intuition and the
about when the Black Death was going on, although that would have definitely sucked as well. But no, I'm referring to Europe as it was roughly 26,000 years ago. Now, this may sound oddly specific, but there is a reason for this, as it marks the approximate moment that the last glacial maximum occurred, a period when ice sheets were at their greatest extent worldwide. And Europe was one of the places most heavily impacted by this, which alone made the continent quite difficult to reside in, with massive ice sheets spanning across areas greater than countries, and coming as far down as Germany. And these glaciers weren't no ice rink that you could simply walk across, as estimates suggest that these sheets might have been nearly 2 miles or 3 kilometers thick at their deepest points, making traversal essentially impossible. Not to mention, it was also brutally cold, with the average temperature being 9 degrees Celsius lower than today, rendering many areas basically uninhabitable to humans. And just as a cherry on top, the coldness also introduced immense aridity.
Here's the popular version of the story. A protest had been held every year called Day of Absence, where minority students and faculty stayed off campus to make a statement about racial issues. In 2017, it was requested that white students and faculty leave campus instead for that year's Day of Absence. Brett vocally protested this idea, saying that you can't force people off campus just for being white. As a result, liberal SJW students threatened Brett with baseball bats, the media erupted with a story about reverse racism, and Brett became a hero overnight by standing up for marginalized white people everywhere. Of course, the reality is totally different. The Day of Absence had always been a voluntary activity where all students could attend workshops and discussions of their choosing, and this year was no different. It was simply that the locations of these discussions had changed, with the off-campus site only able to accommodate 200 people, making it obvious that it was not expected for all white students to attend, nor
As I said in part 1, the sack of Rome by the Gauls in 389 BC destroyed all primary documentation, so we are left with a mixture of legend and historical fiction. Before we get into the story of the early republic, I want to pause for a moment and establish who exactly we are talking about here. I often say that Rome did this and that the Romans did that, but except for a few passing disambiguations, I have not done much to describe the varying nature of the population. Were they some homogeneous hive mind who agreed on everything and acted with a single will? No, quite the opposite. There were rich Romans and poor Romans and middle-class Romans. There were men and women and children. There were slaves and freed slaves and immigrants and criminals and honest men who worked hard every day and lazy men who did not. There were prostitutes and vestal virgins and intellectuals and illiterates. Just like any society, the city of Rome was inhabited by a vast array of individuals, each with their own worldview, motivation, and dream. And just like in any